Hi, and welcome to Kaleidoscope. I'm your host, Rachel Elliott. This week, we're at the Columbus Museum on Winton Road interviewing curator Kristen Miller Zohn. Welcome, Kristen.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon.
Now, Kristen, tell us your biographical information, where you're from, how you got into this particular job, and then we'll talk about the museum.
Okay. Well, I am originally from Cleveland, Ohio, but I moved down to Birmingham, Alabama after the blizzards in the late 70s, where no one should have been living in Cleveland. We all moved south. So all of my educational degrees are from the Southeast. I went to Salem College in Winston-Salem, North Carolina for undergrad, and I really thought I was going to be an English professor. And I was going to marry another English professor, and we were going to have, an English tutor house and do all of those kinds of things. However, because it's a liberal arts school, I needed to take an art history class or a music class, so I chose art history. And the first couple weeks thought that I understand this, I get this. I knew about Impressionist paintings and pre-Impressionist paintings by Manet, and she was showing us Renaissance paintings that had inspired those Impressionists, and I was picking up on the connection. So I thought, hey, I could do this. So I started out as a double major with English and art history, and then I decided that I could take more art history classes and not have to take a creative writing class if I switched to being an art history major. So that's what I did, and I have an English minor. But I did, whenever possible, combine those two loves, and my senior paper was on Dante Gabriel Rossetti, who's an English painter, but also did translations of Dante poems and was a poet himself. So I've always tried to kind of combine those two disciplines, literature and art history. And here at the Columbus Museum, I get to combine history and art history because we're an American art and regional history museum. So I'm always kind of trying to get cross-cultural and cross-disciplinary. So after Salem College, I went to Florida State and got my master's in art history there. And my husband is the classical guitar professor at Columbus State University. And so we kind of started making our way a little further north than Florida, getting jobs in Georgia. And we started out in Albany, Georgia, and then we moved to Columbus about a dozen years ago. So I've had two positions here at the Columbus Museum. I came as the curator of education, which I did for about 6 years. And then in 2007, I switched hats to being the head of the curatorial department. So my department takes care of all the collections and exhibitions that you see in the museum. So we're basically responsible for the content of the exhibitions and of everything you see.
Well, I have to ask, are you a poet or writer or an artist yourself?
No, I am not. That is like asking a Civil War historian which Civil War battle they were in. It doesn't necessarily go from one to the other. So I am, and that's why I didn't want to take creative writing classes, actually. I am not an instigator of things. I'm a synthesizer of things. So I'm inspired by things. I like to put things together. I like to categorize them. I like to explain them. But I don't necessarily want to create things from scratch. So that is why I'm an art historian as opposed to an artist. I did take classes in undergrad and in grad school, so I know how to throw a pot, and I know how to take a photograph, and I've kind of had my hand in paintings and sculpture, so I know how the process of how they're done. But kind of like why I stopped taking piano lessons at the age of 11, I love good music, and I was not producing it to listen to myself. So I actually married a musician, and that takes care of that side. And so I'm not an artist, I'm an art historian.
Are you a collector?
I am a collector. My husband and I collect oak furniture, early 20th century kind of arts and crafts oak furniture. We collect contemporary studio glass. I collect silhouettes. And I would love to collect portrait miniatures, but I have not been able to get into that. I collect images of them on Pinterest, but I don't actually collect the real things yet.
Well, that's fascinating. So you're more into interpretation and history.
Right. I'm very interested in the material culture of things and kind of the context in which they were produced, how they were used by people and how they have survived into our time. So that's why I think the combination between disciplines is very interesting to me. When I can do that here, for instance, the exhibition that you saw when you walked in is an exhibition of accessories from our permanent collection. And our history curator and I, Rebecca Bush and I, co-curated that show. So she was looking at it kind of more from a how people use these things angle, and I was looking at it from the aesthetic, how these things look and how they fit into the other decorative arts of the period. And so between those two things, it kind of gives you a great overview of how the accessories were used. So I try to do that whenever possible, and those are the kinds of things that I'm very interested in. I did an internship at the Museum of Early Southern Decorative Arts in Winston-Salem when I was an undergrad, and they have rooms set up with furniture and painting. So it's not like a gallery situation where you kind of take it out of its context, but you show it being used in its context. And so we try to do that here at the museum whenever we can too.
Okay, so you employ some theatrical elements. You create the visual vignette of how it was used and the accompaniments to it.
Right. So, and we have 8 people on the collections and exhibition staff. So I have an exhibit designer who helps kind of make that vision happen, choosing colors, placing the objects, the graphics, what kind of typeface we're going to use that goes along with the whole mood of what the exhibition is. And in the permanent collection galleries, we try to combine fine art and decorative arts so that you get an idea that they were not separate in people's homes or in the context in which they were, for which they were created. They're always together. When we can make things look more like an actual dwelling or an actual building, we do, but that takes up more room, and we've got a lot of things in the vault we want to get out into the gallery. So we do it as much as we can, but then sometimes we just have to hang it like a straight-on gallery.
I have to say one of my favorite pieces is Chahooly's boat.
Yes.
Did you meet Chahooly? Tell us about that.
I did not meet Chahooly. We bought that from a gallery in Atlanta. So, and it was a whole show of Chahooly's works, but I don't know if he came to that opening or not. And I just missed him at my last job. There was, in the Albany Museum of Art, they had him come to give a lecture and a workshop about 6 months before I got there, so I didn't get to meet him then either. But we were looking for a piece of artwork that would combine our two missions of history and art. And the History Gallery is set up as kind of talking about life on the Chattahoochee River. And so because that is a boat, that was a river boat, and it was made by an American artist, we thought that that was a perfect combination of our missions. So that is our big eye candy piece. My favorite reaction to it of all time was an 18-month-old who came in a stroller with a pacifier in his mouth, and when he saw the Chahooly boat, the pacifier popped out, and he said, "Ah!" So that's just kind of like the guttural reaction to the eye candy. And but he's a very important American artist in terms of bringing Italian glass techniques that were not allowed to leave the island of Murano in Italy for decades or centuries, kind of bringing those techniques to an American audience and really reviving, because glass became such a factory production kind of object, and the studio artist in the 60s kind of brought it back into an artist context, and so he was at the forefront of that. So he's very important, but it's also just really great to look at.
Well, it really spoke to me the first time I ever saw it. I just stood there and cried because I really felt there was so much symbolism to it that, to me, it represented each, we're all very fragile glass vessels. We're all very unique, very uniquely made. We're all in the same boat. Yeah, I mean, we're all here, and it was just so touching and so deeply moving, and I bet there's a lot of different interpretations to that piece.
There are. There's a lot of frequent questions too. The most frequently asked things are, how do you dust it? Which we have an electromagnetic duster that we do more often, and then every once in a while our registrars will put on white gloves and just caress the pieces to get the dust off of them. The other question is, how is it all stuck in there? And it's actually very thick glass. It's kind of more like Coca-Cola bottle glass, so it's not as fragile as you might think. And there is no armature in the bottom of that boat. The Chahooly studio came and placed each of those objects to kind of have gravity hold it all in there. So it's pretty complicated how they put it in there, but there's nothing holding it up except for the pieces themselves.
It's fascinating. It has to be one of the great prides of the museum. So tell us, what is your favorite part about your job here?
My favorite part is being a missionary or a prophet or something to bring art and history to the public and helping people understand things. Museums can sometimes be looked at as a place where, you have to get real dressed up and you have to know something before you go, and it's not for everybody, but they are for everybody. And we are collecting what we're collecting, we're showing what we're showing for the public. We don't want to be a tree falling in the woods with no one to hear. We don't want to be just an archive keeping things for future generations. We want people to be enjoying it and learning about it while they're here. So I enjoy collecting things that will help tell the story of American art and regional culture. I enjoy speaking to groups about it and seeing people get excited from looking at something and feeling like they've learned something. And I just like stuff. So personally, it's fun for me. I have a really great job. I enjoy coming to work every day. So I enjoy letting the public know about it, but it's also gratifying for myself and my own soul to be surrounded by these objects.
I was looking at the calendar on the website, and I was noticing all the educational exhibits and events and workshops, and I was really impressed by that, of how the museum is really reaching out to the public. Tell us some more about the workshops that you're offering for the month of April, namely.
Well, that is handled by our education department. Abby Edens is our curator of education, and she has 3 people on her staff that are always doing something all the time. We just had a symposium of speakers from all over the country who came to speak about women in the visual arts: jewelry maker, a sculptor, a furniture maker, and a pottery that was in New Orleans in the 19th and early 20th century that trained women to be artists and to make a living at doing that. So that was very exciting. Next week starts our Let There Be Art in Bloom, which is a major fundraiser for the museum, and there's going to be lectures and demonstrations and luncheons and a big gala event for a whole week, and an art sale, which is what you saw when you came in, kind of in our spaces that we usually don't hang artwork. So there's going to be something for everybody for that. So that's, even though it is a fundraiser, there's a lot of educational programs going on with that as well.
Well, tell us where you see Columbus Museum in the future.
I know that we will be part of an ever-growing cultural community here in Columbus. My husband and I have always been impressed with how much Columbus cares about the arts, us both being in the arts and having been to other places that will remain nameless that were not as excited and supportive of the arts. All of the music, all of the theater, all of the cultural history kinds of things that are going on. We're one of the biggest buildings. We're one of the oldest organizations. We're celebrating our 60th anniversary this year. We're part of the school district, which is very unusual in terms we can't think of another art museum in the country that's associated with the K-12 school system. So we are a vital part of the community, but that community keeps growing. And we want to kind of make ourselves known to everybody else who's kind of moving into the community or who has been in the community their whole lives and didn't know that we exist. So again, that tree not falling in the woods thing, we want to make more people aware of what we're doing.
Okay. Well, we'll talk more when we come back after these messages. We'll be right back.
Watch Focused on East Alabama Monday nights at 7:30 p.m. on EATV Channel 7.
So here we are at the Chattahoochee boat. Kristen, tell us a story about that.
Dale Chattahoochee, as I was saying, is one of the foremost glass artists in America, and he likes to do outdoor installations. So he'll hang a chandelier under a bridge, or he'll float things down rivers, or he'll put things that look like bamboo rods into a marsh. So he was in Finland, and he was just pushing pieces from different aspects of his installations down the river and watching them float down the river. And the story is that there were some kids downriver in a boat that saw all these beautiful glass pieces floating by, and they picked them up and put them in their boat. And when Chattahoochee saw them doing that, he said, "What a fabulous idea." So he did. We believe there's 3 boat installations, but we think that we have the only one on public view. So that's where the idea came from. But of course, when it was the actual installations were made, they thought a lot more about composition and how many pieces could fit in the boat and how they should go into the boat. The team was also very specific about the lighting of the pieces. They came to do the lighting. Our team, we have a great lighting team, but they're very kind of territorial about how their things look. So they came and spent 3 days installing and lighting the pieces. And so even, if it's a real tall, spiky piece, they wanted the light to be shining at the very end of that spike. So it's a very specific lighting scheme. But it's held up great. We've had it for over 10 years now, and it still makes the boat look as beautiful as the day they installed it.
Well, it is absolutely beautiful. And if you haven't seen it, please do come to the Columbus Museum and see Chattahoochee's boat. Okay, Kristen, here we are at George and Martha Washington. Come and tell us some about this exhibit.
These are 2 new acquisitions to our collection. They are both by Rembrandt Peale, who was part of a family of artists in the 18th and early 19th centuries. His father, Charles Wilson Peale, fought with George Washington in the Revolutionary War. And so as a painter and a friend of his, was someone who depicted him quite a few times. So Charles Wilson Peale had a bunch of daughters and sons, and they all became professional painters. And he got a seating one time with George Washington for a couple of his sons to do portraits of George. And the idea was that they would paint the portrait with him sitting there and then make copies of it to sell, because George Washington was already very, very popular, kind of a religious figure, as it were, even before he died. So, but because Rembrandt was only 17 when he did this first portrait of Washington, he didn't really like it, and so he didn't make that many copies. Later in life, way after George Washington had died, he decided that he wanted to make more copies do some more Washington portraits. So he looked at every portrait that all of his contemporaries and his father's contemporaries had done, including sculptured portraits, and kind of came up with this composite image of George, kind of the iconic, what George Washington is supposed to be kind of thing. He put it in these are called the porthole portraits, because he put it in this kind of trompe-l'oeil stone oval frame here. The one that he originally did, George Washington was in kind of judicial robes in this porthole, and it's supposed to remind you kind of a Roman portrait, so classical, the First Republic. And he gave that to the Senate. So that's called the Pater Patriae portrait, or the Father of Our Country portrait. That was so successful that he started making copies. George faced this way or that way. He had on the judicial robes or just a plain suit or his military outfit. This was the most popular incarnation of it. And then Rembrandt also started painting portraits of Martha to go along with George. This is actually based on a portrait by his father, Charles Wilson Peale. But in his version, he's made her slightly younger and a little bit more aesthetically pleasing to go along with the kind of iconic image of George, kind of who's shown at the height of his powers as well. So they're pendant portraits. They were painted for a Philadelphia patron who had these frames made, so they're the original frames from the 1850s. They've never been separated as a couple, and a great patron of ours just purchased them for us. The reason that we really like them is because it combines our American art mission but with a history mission as well. And we've had a couple school programs, school students did portraits of George that we had down on view in our education gallery. So it's, and we got international press when we acquired them, because the two portraits together, they don't usually remain intact, and this is a very important American artist, so it's a great acquisition for us.
It's fascinating, and that's only here at the Columbus Museum. So Kristen, here we are at the Poem A video installation exhibit. Now tell us about this.
This is another new acquisition for the collection, and we collect everything from 18th century through to contemporary work, and this is a contemporary piece by Bill Viola, who's the foremost video artist in America at this time. His work is really beloved because usually video art is kind of inaccessible to the general public. It's, as opposed to movies or video that you see on television, it doesn't really need to have a plot or a narrative or even dialogue. And it's really much more about the aesthetics of the film itself or the images that you're seeing. So what Bill Viola is very good at doing is making painterly images that people will kind of respond to on an aesthetic level and an emotional level. This is an interesting piece and great for a museum because it's a triptych or a three-pieced video installation. And each of the each of the screens shows kind of a different iconic image from Viola's work. He almost drowned as a child, and right before he almost died was the most peaceful time in his life. And so he's very drawn to depicting water. And so he also does the other elements. So on the far right is a scene of a moonlit lake, and in the middle is which you can't see right now, is a tree that over kind of time elapses into the branches turning into red, so it looks like capillaries, and then that dissolves into a river of fire. And on the left is a shot of the desert shot with night vision goggles, and a woman in a caftan starts out close to the camera and proceeds back into the distance until you can't see her anymore. So there's kind of earth, there's fire, there's water. It's an 11-minute long video, and so you kind of have to wait to the end to see what happens in the moonlit lake, and I will not tell you, so your viewers will want to come and see what happens in the lake. But it's about to start over, so you can see how the images start out. So there's the woman's caftan, and she's very close to the camera and she's walking away, and there's the tree, and then there's the moonlit lake. So it's called Poem A. It's supposed to be kind of poetic and lyrical, and also just very beautiful and compelling to watch. So often with a video installation, somebody will stand in front of it for 30 seconds just like they do with a painting. But these images are so arresting that we find people are standing in front of it for much longer. And this is an example of all the different various ways we get things in the collection. Oftentimes we buy them for ourselves or they're donated to us. And this one was donated to the Columbus Museum in honor of someone's 80th birthday. So if you're looking for a birthday present, then you just can't, for that very special person, and you just can't decide what it should be, gifts and donations to the museum help us with our collections and our programs.
Great, thank you so much. That's Poem A here at the Columbus Museum. We'll be right back after these messages. Hi, and welcome back to Kaleidoscope. I'm your host, Rachel Elliott. We're here at the Columbus Museum on Winton Road in Columbus with curator Kristen Miller Zohn. Welcome back, Kristen.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for that beautiful tour. It was lovely.
We have a huge building. Our building is 85,000 square feet, so we've got quite a lot of space to show wonderful things that not only we own, but that we've borrowed from other institutions too. So it's in addition to our kind of rental spaces that you can come and have a party, and our hands-on children's gallery, and an auditorium that seats 300. So those spaces plus our exhibit spaces and then our offices add up to 85,000, which is a pretty big building.
Well, tell us how the viewers would find you on the internet.
Our website is www.columbusmuseum.com, not .org. Columbus, Ohio took that first. So it's .com. And we are also on Facebook, and we're also on Pinterest. And our phone number is 706-748-2562. And so that either of those places you should be able to get information. We have all of our exhibitions and programs listed on the website. And if you sign up as a Facebook friend, then you'll get updates as to what's going on.
Okay. Do you have any more words for our viewers about the museum?
Well, I just wanted to say a couple things coming up. On this Saturday, April 13th, there's going to be a scrimshaw class, and you might not know what that is, but it's making engravings into bone or ivory. And so that kind of reflects some of our 19th century collections. So that's happening on Saturday. And then on the 25th of April, Auburn journalism students are going to be giving presentations on stories that they have done on kind of legacy stories from the Chattahoochee Valley region. So those are just two things coming up in the next couple weeks. We have a variety of programs for adults and children and families. We also, because we're part of the school district, we have quite a lot of educator and school children programs, and we also have some homeschool programs too for mothers and fathers who are teaching their children at home. So there's all sorts of different things to do. And our tagline is always changing, always free. Our admission is always free. Some of our programs do have a cost if there's a material cost, but for the most part, everything we do here is either low cost or free. And we're open every day but Monday. And we're open late on Thursday nights till 8 o'clock.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for taking the time out to give us a tour and to do this interview. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for highlighting the Columbus Museum.
And thank you for joining us on this week's Kaleidoscope. I'm Rachel Elliott. See you next time.